want to take you to the world's largest gathering of humanity, the Kumbh Mela. Now, as Ree was saying, if you grew up down the street like I did, you read about this in history textbooks. But I never imagined that 2 years ago, in around February of 2013, I would go with a collection of my colleagues, 50 of us from Harvard and MIT and other leading universities, philosophers, religion scholars, mathematicians, doctors, epidemiologists, you name it. And we would go to the Kumbh Mela. For what? Let me show you what this large gathering of humanity actually looks and sounds like for those of you who haven't been to it. So why did we go here? Well, I'm a practicing Hindu, so I went to have a spiritual experience, I suppose. But I also thought that this 1,400-year-old event can teach us something about contemporary challenges, and that's what I want to share with you today. This entire city, pop-up megacity, has to come up in just a few short weeks. Essentially, the Ganga and the Yamuna, the rivers recede, and they're left with a riverbed and a river bank. And you can see the bank there, and this entire city has to pop up in just a few short weeks. The entire population of this pop-up megacity reaches about 30 million on a peak attendance day. That's way more than our very own Mumbai. The cumulative attendance spread along the white parts of this picture, the satellite image. Again, you see the Sangam and the confluence between the two rivers. The cumulative attendance is a good 100 million. 100 million people. This is a map of South Mumbai. In that population, this is not metropolitan Mumbai, but you can see the Kumbh superimposed on South Mumbai. You're talking about 30 million in that space when Mumbai, that part of Mumbai would maybe have 6 or 7 million. So you can imagine the density, and it's on a minimal infrastructure place. So what is it that we can learn from this? In addition to the cumulative attendance stats, look at some of the other numbers. 200,000 people lost during the Kumbh, and then found, for the most part. 35,000 individual toilets, 70,000 people wandering around just making sure that you're safe and are going in a straight line. Now, if you think these numbers are large, they're not. As a percentage of the total attendance, they're minuscule, they're tiny. You compare this to any large gathering. By the way, the Kumbh is maybe 20, 30 times bigger than the Hajj. And it's orders of magnitude bigger than the Olympic Games or any sporting event or festival you can imagine anywhere in the world. And yet, it is carried out with extraordinary efficiency. Now, those of you who are from India, most of us, I imagine, right? We're not used to thinking of our government, as well-intentioned as it might be, as being efficient. I'm not. But here you had an instance where it was pulled off with remarkable efficiency. And I think the answer to how this was done is probably in your pocket. You're all carrying a phone, an iPhone or an Android phone. It has an operating system, right? An iOS or an Android op system. And then it's got a bunch of apps that run on it that do particular things that you care about. So the government in the Kumbh essentially was providing a minimal operating system, essentially saying, we lay down some simple roads, we provide 24/7 lighting for security purposes, a few toilets, some snipers to watch out for bad guys, but that's about it. And then the rest of civil society and private entrepreneurs can come in and say, as long as we subscribe to certain soft rules that the government puts in place, we are able to provide our own apps. We might provide better food, we might provide better transportation, we might provide fancy, whiz-bang, lost and found services using cell phones, and so on and so forth. So essentially think of it as a minimal operating system that the government provides. So the government is cognizant, in this case, of its own capabilities and is not over-promising and under-delivering, as it often does, but doing what it can do and doing it really well. And then welcoming others to join its platform and work in concert. And we like to refer to this sort of thing as a public-private partnership. In this case, it actually works. That's the brilliance of it. As an example of this, these are pictures of the akhadas. The akhadas are sects, each run by a sadhu, a religious person, right? Each akhada will be responsible for everything within it. So the government doesn't get in and say, hey, Mr. Akhada A or Akhada B, you must do things this way. You can see the incredible diversity. But you're responsible for the tens, hundreds of thousands of people, maybe even millions of pilgrims in your akhada. You're responsible for their housing, shelter, food, etc. on your own. So you get this amazing diversity. Now, we from Harvard had the temerity, perhaps, to say, there must be something that we can add to this. And we're used to thinking about smart cities around the world, Masdar in the Middle East, zero-carbon cities in China, fancy cities in Silicon Valley. In my neck of the woods, we have all sorts of computers running around trying to make things smarter. So we thought, let's go to the platform and put a data skin on top of the platform and see if we can improve things at the Kumbh Mela. This is the first Kumbh that actually I referred to as the cell phone Kumbh. It's the first time that I would guess 60%, 70% of people attending had a phone in their hands. So we persuaded Bharti Airtel, one of our big cell phone companies, to share within the limits of Indian law cell phone data with us. Here's a simple plot over a 90-day period, including the 55 days of the Kumbh, showing the peak attendance on February 10th, which is the holy day, Mani Amavasya, one of the 3 holiest days, so validating the utility of the data. Here's another simple plot that mathematicians like to use, just to show the density of people, again, on a particular day. The dark red corresponds to the Sangam. You see maximal people in that spot. And we can use these data structures and algorithms and data. We had a total communication events, about 400 million of them, so it's a large data set. Use them to understand how do crowds flow? When do people move from one point to another? Why do they surge? Why do they pull back? Do they hang out with people like themselves? Do they hang out with people who are different from themselves? And use that to say that we can do things better at the Kumbh, even though this has been going on for 1,400 years. There's something that we can learn from it. As an example, I'll tell you about healthcare. This is a poor, hapless government official busy writing down in a file. You're familiar with this in the government office. That file recording people's complaints is going to sit in some pile and nobody will see it forever. Why can't we do better than this? Some of my students run a company in Bangalore called Janacare. It does diabetes monitoring, and the little device you can see attaches to any cell phone. This is purely one example of a medical device that we could use deployed at the Kumbh, and in fact, we pulled off in the Nasik Kumbh, which was a tiny Kumbh a couple of months ago, just 30 million people. A single nurse equipped with that device, set up in a hospital in Bangalore just for test purposes, could easily see 4,000 patients in a month. Now imagine, remember I told you about the 70,000 people wandering around doing public safety and shepherding people and helping them find lost and found centers? What if we went from 70,000 to just 71,000 and spread these nurses with these medical devices around? So now you've got the cell phone data, you've got basic algorithms that we can write, you've got decentralized medical devices measuring things in real time. You can actually do things that direct people towards the healthcare facilities very, very efficiently. Just to give you a sense of the scale of the challenge, the town where I work, Cambridge in Massachusetts, where Harvard and MIT are, it turns out has 2 hospitals and 40 clinics. The Kumbh Mela, purely by coincidence, has, guess what, 2 hospitals and 40 clinics. But it's got 300 times more people in it, right? So, and when we went there, we noticed that half the hospitals were empty, the others were full of people, there was chaos all around. If we just had these little sensors around, and they cost almost nothing, the allocation of this kind of public good, which is after all the essence of urban planning, would be so much more efficient. This is a picture of an unfolding tragedy today. This is the Syrian refugee crisis. This is simply an aerial shot of a refugee camp in Jordan. It's a complete mess. It is not organized on either the platform-like minimal operating system with apps idea that I suggested to you, nor are devices allocated across it. There's just chaos. I submit to you that the Kumbh Mela would tell us how to run this refugee camp so much better. And my colleagues and I are now working on this, using the insights from the Kumbh Mela, of all things. This is in my own adopted country in the United States. We had a massive hurricane, Hurricane Katrina, in New Orleans. This is something called the Superdome. 25,000 people were crammed in here, utter chaos. Widely criticized as being badly handled. The Kumbh Mela had 1,000 times more people than this. 25 million to 30 million on the peak day, run so much more smoothly. So my submission to you, ladies and gentlemen, as the institute that I run at Harvard, the South Asia Institute, which pulled together this smorgasbord of talents, demonstrated, I think in this case, an ancient event, a 1,400-year-old event, can teach us so much about contemporary challenges. Thank you very much.